Welcome to another episode of KinCasts, where we explore the joys of connecting with loved ones through private podcasts. I'm your host, David Beckmeyer, and I want to help you capture the magic of your family stories.
I have an interesting background. I was raised in a cult, so that made for an interesting upbringing, very complicated. Some of it was very traumatic, and some of it was very happy and fulfilling. So I grew up with kind of like a tainted view on people in general, and what was expected of me, and where I was going to go when I died. My whole life was all planned out for me. And then when I got older, I started to kind of detach from that and started to do more critical thinking and just found a lot of problems with it. And I started studying other cults and then discovered that I was in one. So that's how that worked.
That's Alexis Arralynn, host of the When the Bow Breaks podcast. That's interesting because often it's really hard to do that, to make that transition, because your identity is so tied up in it that it's hard to recognize.
Yeah, it was very challenging. I needed a lot of therapy. I had a major identity crisis because not only was I raised in the cult, but I was as pastoral as a woman could get in the church. So I was on staff and I'd lived it. I had served in the church almost every single day. So it wasn't just a Sunday thing for me. It was every day, 3 times a day, morning, noon, night, you were thinking about Jesus. And so when I detached from that, I feel like a big chunk of my life just got wiped out. And I had no idea what to do with it. I had no idea how to function. Sundays always felt different to me, and they still do. And so even now I get a little bit weird on Sundays. Sometimes I'm thinking, what should I do today? Instead of going to church and listening to a bunch of fearful messages and things like that. So it's been 10 years this year that I've been out of the cult. And my life looks very different now. But it's good. It's good.
So are there other family members that are also out of the cult that you communicate with?
Some of them still kind of like, I know they don't practice it, but they still call themselves of the faith because they don't want to face the criticism and the isolation that comes along with publicly denying your faith. And so I feel like there's an exception made because certain people haven't publicly denied the faith. They still attend church even though they're not really practicing. But I publicly left and publicly spoke against the church and all of my experiences. So basically, I lost most of my family and friends, lost contact with them. And that's pretty much what kicked off my show, essentially. I was encouraged by members of my support group team to start a podcast on family estrangement because at the time there were none. And we felt that it was something that needed to be talked about. And so I launched my podcast in 2019. I still felt pretty fresh out of the cult. Left my family. My marriage also ended, as it does when you become unequally yoked to your partner. And so I walked away from essentially everything. And when I started the show, I had 0 friends. I had 0 acquaintances. I literally started from scratch, started sharing it from scratch with strangers, and it grew, and it's become what it is today, listened to, and we're at 58 countries. So it's pretty cool. People listen all around the world. Pretty neat.
And what's the podcast called?
It's called When the Bow Breaks podcast.
Cool. And so that's a really difficult life step to take, to just walk away from basically everything, and especially without you've seen some of these stories where maybe 3 sisters or something kind of get together and do it together or something like that. But, do it all by yourself, including walking away from your marriage. Wow. So I take it you didn't have kids?
I have 4 children.
Oh, wow.
I had all four of those children in 6 years, very close together until I couldn't have any anymore, had some health issues. But I was in that sort of religion where you were pushed to have as many children as you possibly could. I could only possibly have four. So we stopped at four. Two of my children still live with their father. They chose to stay there because they have family and friends and they got used to the school there. And so they stay with their dad, but their dad doesn't, and their dad is still in the church. So my ex-husband's still in the church, but he doesn't force our children to go, which is good. So I feel good about that. But the two younger ones, they really missed Washington and they still very much needed mom. So the two younger ones are with me, and then we kind of swap and trade and travel and meet up and stuff like that. So we make it work. It's not all ideal, but again, I've had a lot of support.
So you are still in contact with your ex-husband then, at least, and your kids?
We don't speak because I have a protection order against him, but we do our best to take care of the kids. Or, even though we don't agree, I think we do each individually have our kids' best interest at heart.
So tell me about how the podcast journey started, how far did you have to go to sort of just figure out all the tech and other stuff related to doing a podcast?
I love this question because I feel like I started podcasting when not everybody did it back then. I feel like I was still kind of a pioneer because there were no books on podcasting. You had to find any article you could that would give you some answers to things, but mostly I think I really got things started when I joined some of the online support groups on Facebook and just kind of rubbed up against other people who had been doing it for a while and just kind of learned that way. I think the most thing that helped, I think Buzzsprout did have a kind of how to podcast, but even then there were still some holes that I had to kind of figure out on my own through trial and error and just asking other people. So yeah, I had no experience of podcasting at all, but I did have recording experience and some production experience and some public speaking experience from my pastoral history. But I wasn't used to using my voice, saying things that I wanted to say or my own thoughts. I wasn't used to that at all. So I felt very awkward when I first started podcasting. For sure, I felt scared because I was sharing something that was very personal. I actually changed my name for the show, or changed my name after I left the cult. Number one, because I didn't feel like I was hiding. I just wanted to kind of protect my family's identity. But as the show kind of went on, after some years, I'd received contact from one of my family members. They actually found my show because they themselves were looking for estrangement resources, which I thought was kind of funny. So the family that I had been estranged from found my show because they were looking for estrangement resources. So I was kind of accidentally exposed, I guess. They weren't too happy about the things that I was saying. But on the other hand, I was like, well, at least my show is reaching the right people.
Yeah. So you didn't stay in touch with that other family that also, did they leave the cult subsequently or no?
No, they didn't. They're still in it, pretty deep. I'm just like scared and have cold feet. That's something I'm talking about, though, like working out, like in therapy and counseling and stuff like that. Definitely something that I think about often is reconnecting with some people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I could see how it could be difficult.
Yeah, so I never know how to go about it. I recently went to an extended family member's wedding, and I hadn't seen them since before I left the church. And they've known that I've been estranged for several years. They also have kind of issues with that part of the family. They're still in the church, but again, they didn't cease contact with me. So I felt safe enough to go and attend the wedding. I knew that my sister was going to be there and her ex-husband, but that was pretty much the only family that was going to be there. So I thought, I can handle that, But while I was there, they actually created this scenario where they tried to kidnap my children. And police actually had to rescue them. And So now I have no contact with any of those people, and I regret going. It was very scary. It was very sad. It affected my two daughters. They were traumatized, and they had to have therapy for that. And then their dad tried to do the same thing about a month later. And so there is a huge element of like personal safety. Sometimes people in the cult, they feel entitled to the children. They have to save the children. They have to save their souls. They have to get the children while they're young so they can indoctrinate and they can, push all of that stuff on them. And so they've been doing everything they can to remove my children from me. They've been failing, but they have tried. And so, a lot of that is still going on. But again, I have a lot of support. I've got security. I live 2 doors down the fire station. And, I feel pretty good.
All right. Well, that's a wild story. Very brave of you to do that. And and so I'm happy to hear that you have this support system, because that's what's going to be such a huge factor in all this. Well, I appreciate you making time to chat with us today. And any inspiring words for folks that want to share a story?
Yeah. Sharing a story can be very scary, but that just goes to show how powerful it will be. So don't let your fear get bigger than anything that you want to do. So yeah, it's like as soon as you open your mouth, you're going to realize like it's going to open up a whole new world. It's being a little scary. That's okay. But again, like don't let that fear stop you.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. Well, again, so thank you so much for making the time.
Welcome. I appreciate all this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of KinCast. I hope you've been inspired to capture the magic of your family stories and share them through the power of private podcasts. For more resources and inspiration, visit kincasts.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review and subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, remember every story matters and your family story deserves to be heard. Take care and happy storytelling.